Our first speaker this morning is Magda Havas, PhD. Dr. Havas is an associate professor of environmental and resource studies at Trent University, where she teaches and does research on the biological effects of environmental contaminants. Dr. Havas received her PhD from the University of Toronto, completed postdoctoral research at Cornell University, and taught at the University of Toronto before going to Trent University in Peterborough, Canada. Her current research is concerned with the biological effects of electromagnetic pollution, including radio frequency radiation, electromagnetic fields, dirty electricity, and ground current. She works with diabetics as well as with individuals who have multiple sclerosis, tinnitus, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and those who are electrically hypersensitive. Her latest research links microwave radiation from wireless phones to heart irregularities such as arrhythmia, which are irregular beats of the heart, and tachycardia, which is rapid heartbeat. She also conducts research on sick building syndrome as it relates to dirty electricity in schools. She helped draft Resolution 15 that was passed by the International Association of Firefighters in August 2004 in Boston. She also helped draft a private member's bill on ground current pollution, the contents of which have been adopted by the Ontario Energy Board. She has given talks in more than a dozen countries on her research. Dr. Havas has co-edited 3 books and has published more than 100 articles. Her most recent book, co-authored with Camilla Reese, is Public Health SOS, The Shadow Side of the Wireless Revolution. She is the author and designer of the Bragg Antenna Ranking of School Study, released April 2010. Dr. Havas served as an expert witness in matters dealing with electrical pollution in both Canada and the United States, and has been an advisor to several public and educational groups concerned with the health of the environment. She serves on the Scientific Secretariat for the International Commission for Electromagnetic Safety and serves as science editor on EMF-related issues to nonprofit organizations in Canada, United States, the United Kingdoms, and the Netherlands. Dr. Havas will be speaking with us this morning from 9 o'clock till 10:20. She asks that you refrain from asking questions during her speech. She will allow a 15-minute Q&A session starting shortly after 10 o'clock. And without further ado, let's warmly welcome Dr. Magda Havas.
Thank you very much. Can people hear me all right? Does that sound pretty good? No, it isn't? Okay, is it any better now? Okay, I just have to fix my clothing. Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. This is a very difficult room to find. I looked for it yesterday, and so I wasn't in a panic this morning, so I could actually find it. I'm going to talk about something called electrosmog and electro-hypersensitivity, and I'm just wondering how many people in the audience know what electro-hypersensitivity is. If you could just raise your hand. Okay, there's a few hands going up. Well, a very large population, and it's growing, is becoming quite ill, and I think the reason they're becoming ill is because of the electromagnetic pollution that a lot of the devices that we love to own are generating. And what I'd like to do is share with you my understanding of what electrosmog is and inform you about what my understanding of electrosensitivity is, and then give you some recommendations as what you can do if you're a practicing physician or medical health practitioner, what you can do for your patients, and for those of you who think you might be electrically sensitive, what you can do to actually protect your health and recover your health. So I'm going to start talking about electrosmog. And I think everyone's familiar with the LA smog that sits over large cities. Los Angeles certainly isn't the only city that has this problem. It's something we can see, it's something we can smell, some people can taste it, and so we're very much aware of it. And there's been a large effort in North America to clean up air, to improve air quality, and certainly California is one of the leading states on this. Well, electrosmog is something very similar. We're exposed to it through the air, along wires, and it radiates from wires in a variety of forms that I'll share with you today. And we also experience it through the ground. Now, how many people here live on farms? And how many people are aware of stray voltage? Okay, well, basically what I'm talking about is electricity flowing through the ground and affecting cattle and other farm animals, but also affecting farm families. And this is something that the urban community doesn't have a really good sense of, except for the fact that recently in New York State, in Ontario, dogs have been zapped while they're being walked on city streets during the winter when there's a lot of salt put on sidewalks to prevent things from icing. And because the infrastructure in parts of North America are so outdated, there have been loose wires that have actually electrocuted some dogs, where dogs have actually died from this. And there's one example in New York where a woman walking her dog stepped on a metal manhole cover and died because she was electrocuted. So that's a very severe example of what I'm talking about, it flowing through the ground. The reason we have a problem is that we've started using electricity. And I just want to make it perfectly clear, I'm not against electricity. So I'm not asking anyone to, turn the clock back and to stop using the remarkable devices that we have. But we're not using it as safely as we can. And ever since we started with the Edison light bulb, there have been new tools or technologies that come on board. Radio was invented by Marconi or Tesla, depending on who you believe, and we have the privilege of being able to communicate around the world with radio, television, and satellite communications now. Radar was invented during the 1940s, during World War II. It uses microwave radiation. That was really the first technology that began to use microwave radiation. And you can see here that as we get closer to the top, there are more and more inventions that are using radio frequency and microwaves. What we have here with television and with radio and with computers, they're using something called radio frequency radiation, and that's just at a lower part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Every single time a new invention was brought on market, we've had health effects associated with it. And initially, we didn't use the technology wisely. And this is true not only for electromagnetic technology, but the way that we used pesticides, for example, the way that we used asbestos in the past. Not only did we use it as fireproofing in homes, but with asbestos, it was actually put in cereal boxes, so it came in contact with food. It's found in baby powder, talc, and parents were putting it on babies' bottoms without knowing that it was contaminated with asbestos. So we've got a legacy of using something and not using it properly until we recognize there are health effects, and then we begin to adjust our use. And one of the things I'd like to draw your attention to, let me just go back to this. One of the things I'd like to draw your attention to is when X-rays were first discovered, it was an absolutely miraculous tool that doctors have since used and dentists have used in order to tell us something about the human body. And I don't know how many of you know this, but when we first began to use X-rays, it was used in shoe stores to fit children's shoes. Is anyone aware of that? Okay. Because children have a hard time telling whether or not their feet are close to the edge, and parents often wanted to buy shoes that were at least going to last more than a few months, so they were usually larger than what the child needed so the child could grow into it. And there was equipment called a fluoroscope. And basically it was a tall box or a lectern like this, and at the top of it you could look down, you could put your feet under it, and you could wiggle your toes, and basically you were exposing children's feet to X-rays. When we discovered that X-rays were harmful, that practice stopped immediately. The advantage over X-rays and some of the other technology that I'm going to be talking about is with X-rays, we know it's lethal because of certain things that scientists did. There was one scientist, for example, who was so convinced X-rays were safe that he exposed his hand for about 20 minutes to X-ray radiation, and within 2 weeks he was dead of X-ray poisoning. So that was a very powerful message that we can't play with this technology and use it in a frivolous manner. With respect to the other exposures that I'm referring to, usually the reaction takes months or years, and so it's very difficult to make the connection between what you were exposed to and what you're responding to. There are a number of chronic illnesses that we're dealing with in our society, and I've got a list of some of them here. And what I'd like to suggest is that every single illness here I can link to electrosmog in certain frequencies based on the studies that have been done. If we look at the pharmaceutical industry, the best money makers are antidepressants, painkillers, and sleeping pills. This is something our society is living with right now. We simply don't sleep well, we're under a lot of pain, and many of us are depressed. And so we treat that with drugs rather than actually going to the root cause of the problem. I'm not making a statement here saying that all depression is due to electromagnetic radiation, but it contributes to all of these illnesses. And in my career, I've been looking at this for about 15 years, and I started to put together a jigsaw puzzle in my head because I could see a lot of different illnesses that were repeatedly suggested to be due to something, and I began to put together this map, and this is what my map looks like. Part of the illnesses are associated with ground current or stray voltage, and it's not restricted to farms. In urban areas, it comes into your home through plumbing, and so every single time you touch a faucet, there's electricity flowing through your body if you have a ground current problem. And it's something that simply isn't measured enough in urban areas. In rural areas where you have dairy farms, it's something that's very well documented because it affects milk production, and because milk production is something that we record quite carefully, we can recognize a change within a 24-hour period. And that's about how long it takes for cows to recover if you clean up the ground current. Within about 24, 48 hours, they're producing much more milk than they did previously. There's been a lot of research looking at low-frequency electromagnetic fields, and often they're called extremely low-frequency, or ELF. And here the early research looked at two different groups. One was children who were developing leukemia, and it turned out that many of the kids who had leukemia happened to live near high-voltage transmission lines, substations, transformers, and other types of power lines. And that evidence was powerful enough to cause the International Agency on Cancer, International Agency on Research on Cancer, to actually label low-frequency electromagnetic fields as a Class 2B carcinogen, which means possibly carcinogenic. We also have evidence from occupational exposure with adults that there are at least 3 types of cancers that are strongly associated with these low-frequency electromagnetic fields, and I call them the 3 Bs. They include cancer of the brain, cancer of the breast, and cancer of the blood, or leukemia. There's also been a lot of research looking at radio frequency and microwave radiation, and here we're dealing with the wireless technology that has been invented, leading to brain tumors, for example, and different types of tumors associated with the head for those who use cell phones, mobile phones, but it's also linked to infertility, problems with reproduction, miscarriages, sperm immobility. So the list goes on with radio frequency radiation. And the missing link here is something that there are only 2 scientists in the world that I know of who are looking at biological effects. One of them is Dr. Sam Millam in California, who's a retired medical doctor and an epidemiologist, and he's been doing research in the entire area of electromagnetics for a long time, mostly looking at the extremely low frequencies, and quite recently he started looking at something called dirty electricity, and I'm going to share some of his results with you, and I'm also going to share some of my results with you as well. There are more scientists who are becoming interested in this, so I'm really hoping that we're going to advance in this area because I do think it has been the missing link. And today I'm just going to focus on 2 things, dirty electricity and the wireless technology that we're exposed to. Now, very often I'm asked, what is dirty electricity? And I can explain it best by showing pictures. This is what clean electricity looks like. In North America, our electricity uses alternating current, and it alternates 60 times a second. So we call it 60 hertz frequencies. The rest of the world uses 50 hertz frequencies. And it's just a nice smooth sine wave that comes into electrical and electronic devices. If you have an electronic device, it begins to put trash back onto the line. And by trash, I'm referring to high-frequency transient spikes that are generated as the electronics